Now that my team has reached playoffs in the intermediate division and is moving up to main, finally getting out of what are essentially the lower divisions, I feel a bit conflicted, and I think I want to share my competitive experience. I've played 3 of the major formats, those being Sixes, Prolander, and Highlander, but I mostly played and focused on Sixes, so that's what you're mostly going to hear about from me. I started seriously playing competitive TF2 a bit over a year ago, just like a lot of other people did according to the stats for RGL, with the doubling of the amount of Sixes teams. In that first season, I asked 2 of my friends if they wanted to play, signed up for the Newbie Mix team drive with my 2 friends, got assigned to a team. The season went really well, all things considered. We had a coach assigned to us from Newbie Mixes that showed us all the info we needed, where to hold, when to push, when to play other classes, and more. With the entire team having 0 competitive experience, we still made it into playoffs and were competitive with the other teams pretty much the whole season. We had a lot of fun together, and I learned a lot about being a team leader, and I would continue being the team leader of the same team for a few more seasons, for 4, as of now. The team itself was great, generally speaking. With the exception of the lineup for half of Season 1, the team was essentially a group of friends that were just playing a game together and trying to win. It was great. We changed up a little bit of the lineup every season until the last remaining members of the team were just the soldiers. Myself as Pocket Soldier, and Broccoli, my roamer. But that didn't stop us from making friends with our new teammates and making fun of each other. We would have some team bonding experiences like playing Jackbox together and making emotes for the server, having a Minecraft server, or just playing random games. We also signed up for cups and other formats. We had a Highlander team and a Prolander team with varying amounts of team members, but the majority were our 6. We took 2 silver trophies, and that's 2 more than I was expecting to get when I started. Being a team leader is hard, both in terms of main calling in a match and in terms of handling scheduling and actually keeping your team together. There are matches that you will lose that you totally should have won, and those feel horrible. There are matches that you win that you should have lost, and those are great. But when your team isn't doing so hot and players are getting frustrated, it can be hard to stay motivated. And if you stay in this state for a while, you'll pretty much just start losing the season off of it. Which is why one of the main issues I see for many teams is that players don't have the same priorities. Some players might just be playing for fun, while others want to win and move up to the next division. The latter players are going to be frustrated with the former because they're not improving and are holding back the team, while the former are going to be frustrated because that's not what they signed up for. Knowing what both you and your players want as a team leader is really important to control the team. Knowing when to cut people and pick up others is something I never mastered and is also important. And on top of that, organization, especially with scheduling at a lower level, can bring you up from being a bad team leader to a great one. The reason being that a team that doesn't practice doesn't get better. So if you can't get scrims to practice, well, your team is going to suffer, and teams that would be worse than you are going to get better than you. Okay, so let's talk about toxicity really quickly. I've dealt with a bit playing so far, not as much as pub players would expect you to believe, but there definitely is some. Volunteers for different leagues definitely get the brunt of it. I mean, an E2F2L admin stopped adminning, and some guy didn't care and just pestered for medals on the same thread. Some players just have no emotional empathy, and they just act like an entitled Karen at a retail store. It's really annoying to deal with, whether in a league environment or a pug environment. But I've also had to deal with harassment from one particular player, getting his friends to spam me with toxic Discord messages and deleting them in their alt accounts after I receive them. That way I have no proof. It's really annoying and demotivating, but it's something that the majority of players don't have to deal with if they're not an admin or a team leader. Toxicity in general compared to pubs is far lower. Maybe you have some trash talk from that sick air shot you just landed, but that's usually the extent of it. With the toxicity out of the way, the scene at the level that I played has been really positive. Other team leaders have generally been courteous, and other players have been fun to play with or against. I've had encouragement to work on videos, improve at the game, get pointers for practice, get a mentor to teach me how to be a better soldier, and more. The competitive scene has this toxic group circle near the top, but the many players that are not in that group really make the scene something special, and it's one of the reasons I kept going season after season. Onto the league I played in RGL, the main North American league that I ended up volunteering for, and still do. I'm one of the leaders on the video team, and I create the dispatch episodes every week with the help of Zeverek, who honestly does the actual hard work of updating the graphics every week. I like RGL, and I want it to grow. Looking back on other leagues that have been around or exist currently, while RGL needs work, it's definitely one of the better leagues due to cracking down on toxicity. The environment is just different, and it's relatively welcoming compared to other leagues, which is nice. I just wish that RGL could have more volunteers for a variety of roles, and that the league could bring in more money to sustain itself. Besides that, I'd like to see more meta-defining changes that can hopefully shift the culture of sixes to be more inclusive, and help close the gap between not just competitive and casual, but competitive and Valve. Being on a TF2 team can be weird if you've never played an esport before, and even weirder if you have, depending on the game, both in terms of gameplay and culture. If you play Smash, you're used to relying on only yourself, and only having yourself to blame when things go wrong. You don't have scheduled matches outside of tournaments, and nowadays you can play competitively at pretty much any time, due to Slippy being great. In Halo, it's kind of the same story, except you have a team, and if you want to practice by yourself, you can just queue up to play competitive game modes and get ranked. TF2 is different than both, which are the two scenes that I have experience in, which felt weird. The in-game competitive mode is fine, and has more games played than community means every day. It's fun and lets people do what they want, but if you want to get practice against good, skilled players, you typically can't find them in competitive mode. The reason is that they're either playing together as a team in scrims, or are playing pugs in whatever pug group they decided to join, and hopefully soon, RGL pugs. TF2 has tried to emulate the Smash scene as a grassroots esport with rules and regulations that keep the scene fun and fair, but it's run into two problems while missing one large fact. First, what one considers fun is subjective and can vary from person to person. And second, TF2 has active development on the game, and because of that, it can change. Melee at this point has avoided death despite Nintendo trying to kill the scene, with passionate players, a large amount of media for new people of the scene to enjoy, stories to get involved in, and more. TF2's competitive scene has pretty much none of that. The only players you really see making anything or having stories are those on the #1 team, Froyotech. Banny has a YouTube channel, the most successful Twitch channel of any TF2 content creator besides Lazy Purple, and Habib is following up on him in terms of Twitch. But outside of that, you don't really see competitive players. Some of them may stream, but they don't really interact with the normal casual crowd. The distance between the current competitive scene and casual scene, as well as the lack of quality content around competitive, has made competitive really niche and damn near impossible to grow. The top level of the scene doesn't really seem to want to change, and the whitelist is a really good example of that. I'm not a top level player, but even I can say that a good chunk of the banned items wouldn't make a noticeable difference if they were unbanned, and some of them could actually improve the game and promote different playstyles. Obviously some, like the Wrangler and Mad Milk, are far too strong in my experience of no restriction 6s, but I don't think that anyone's going to complain if the base jumper is unbanned. Any conversations about outreach to Valve on the format, or changing the format in a progressive way to at least somewhat go towards what Valve wants, is met with both support, but equal amounts of pushback. The support realizing that Valve has historically made changes based on input from players who have experience against said items, which cannot be said for many of the banned items, or off of stats. Then the pushback being from people who don't care, but don't think that the majority will accept, then the players who don't want the changes and don't think that Valve would support us even if we made them. Both sides have a fair point, but I'd rather choose optimism that at least bridges the gap to encourage new players rather than pessimism that keeps us where we are, where nothing changes. If I was able to instantly make players be accepting of change and had the power to, I would run Valve Competitive as a format again, as RGL has done before, and run the current 6s, but have a progressive environment where there's at least one change per season. Maybe the first season you unban 2 weapons, maybe the next you do another and rotate a map. You get the point. The meta for Valve Competitive, also known as no restriction 6s, is undefined, and while it does get defined, Valve has the opportunity to watch and make balance changes off of it, hopefully making all of the items balanced for a traditional setting where items no longer need to be banned anymore, clearing up one of the major barriers to entry. Ironically, after my experience in competitive so far, it's funny to say that my attitude has almost completely flipped from when I only played casually. Since I started playing, I've spent roughly about a third of my hours in competitive, and I can't really see myself going back except to get footage in pubs for videos to make them more applicable, especially now with the bot problem. That's something I don't think I would have ever considered in the past. I now think that hours in the game don't matter at all because, well, they don't. You can have 10,000 hours in TF2 and not be as mechanically good as someone who only has 1,000. Reason being that the person with only 1,000 hours has spent their time playing against people who are just as good, if not better than them, which is how you improve at any game. I started playing competitive with roughly 2,000 hours in the game, but my roamer with just 700 was far better than me. And I've played against people with 5 times my hours that are nowhere near as good as either myself or any of my teammates, because they weren't practicing to get better, they were just having fun, which is fine. The scene is far less intimidating as it was before, and I no longer care about what toxic players think of me, as long as it's not impeding on the growth of the game or the scene. I've gotten significantly better at the game over each season, and honestly, after just playing Newcomer in my first season, I went from being the top of the leaderboard in the pub almost every time to every time as long as I was trying. I was forced to get better, and I'm really glad that I did. I can now rocket jump better than I used to, even doing left side jumps, my aim is far better and my game sense followed suit. I am now far more educated about balancing discussions and decisions because, well, I have played against players that are willing to use any item to their best extent. I also now realize that balancing for different formats and pubs is far harder than I thought it would be. Some items could get nerfed to be still really good and competitive, but then would be garbage in pubs and vice versa. There's definitely a medium that can make everyone happy, but it takes a bit of conversation and thought to get there. A great example would be the Diamondback. In casual, it's amazing because players are mostly oblivious and don't turn around, allowing you to just rack up crits. Then if you're playing payload or any form of attack defend, it's even better, as a single kill on an engineer can net you up to 5 crits, which is insane. Then multiply that by how many engineers that there are on a team, and the spy just has perpetual crits in a pub setting. In Highlander, it's not as effective since people are generally more spy aware, but the issues with racking up crits on engineer are still prevalent. But then in sixes, the Diamondback isn't really good. The reason being that the Letron J is just a better option because the spy's role in sixes, as well as the fact that engineer isn't really run. In my head, the thought to change the Diamondback would be to remove the crits on destroyed buildings and just continue to reward spy for backstabs. That whole process I just went through there, I wouldn't have been able to do it if I hadn't played competitive. I'd only have the pub 9 set and just want it nerfed into the ground. Playing competitive has made me realize how strong or weak classes or items actually are, and how they affect different formats since I've now played in all of them. Do I have a favorite format? Yeah, it's sixes. But as mentioned before, I think sixes can improve, and I don't think that balancing should or will ever not consider pubs since that's where the majority of players are. In summary, do I recommend competitive for players that want to get better at the game or want to play the game in a more serious environment? Absolutely. The only thing that people should keep in mind is to not play a format because people tell you to. I often hear people tell casual players to play in Highlander since it's easier, but if you want to be a sixes or Prolander or NR6's player, play that. You don't have to start with a specific format to play competitive. As I'll mention in another video, you can do what you want. You can challenge the meta at your level. You just need to make sure that your team is okay with that. If you want to run Pyro or Engineer full time, go for it. As long as your team is fine with that and is willing to adapt, it could be fun for you. At the end of the day, TF2 is just a game, and a damn good one at that.